Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to talk about this social media post by Elder Christofferson. I've seen a lot of people talking about this. So I guess what happened is they installed the newest president of BYU, C. Shane Reese, and Elder Christofferson made this social media post where it says, "We may be moving into a more fractious world than any of us have experienced personally heretofore." And we're going to read the whole thing and essentially talk about persecution, some interesting things that have been said about persecution. And I think what a lot of people are wondering is he basically saying that definitely there's going to be persecution, the likes of which none of us have experienced personally? Which I think it's maybe safe to assume that anyway, but we're going to look at some interesting things that have been happening lately with the church and persecution. And I know that's something that gets a lot of people afraid, but I'm going to end this video by going over a part of my quotes A through Z spreadsheet, a row that's called "The Future is Bright." Because sometimes we tend to get wrapped up in the doom, in the gloom, whether it's natural disasters or war or the Constitution or increased persecution. And that's a really easy thing to fall into, especially when you're, looking forward to the second coming, because you expect all these bad things to happen. But I think we're going to find some balance here and see what the prophets and apostles have actually said about that. Before we get into all that, there's actually a couple emails I want to share with you. I just go off on a little bit of a tangent. This is from Brian Gross, and the subject line says, "Signs in the heavens. Check this out. Northern lights expected to be the most intense in 30 years." Jared, this one's especially meaningful to me. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and love seeing northern lights. It's a sight. I've since lived in Utah, Texas, and Arkansas. I hope to see them again, and I get excited about them being potentially visible in more southern latitudes over time. This article says, quote unquote, over the next 18 months. 18? Signs in the heavens, DNC 19, verse 14. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this article. This is from News Nation. Northern lights expected to be the most intense in 30 years. Sunspot observations, a key predictor of the northern lights, have dramatically increased since 2022. Scientists say if the trend continues, the next 18 months will bring the strongest northern lights in decades. The northern lights will be more viewable, more often, from more places on Earth in the next 18 months than they have been in the past 20 years and are expected to be in the next decade, scientists told NBC News. So I don't know if there's like a typo in the title, because this says 30 years, but then later in the body of the article it says 20 years. So I don't know. I was confused about that, so I pulled up another article. This is from Interesting Engineering. Upcoming northern lights to be the strongest in 20 years. And so they seem to go with 20 years. So I don't know if they just, if there's like a typo in the title of this article. But nevertheless, 20 years, that's a long time. That takes us back to, the year 2003. So that was a long time ago. Okay, let's continue. The Solar Cycle 25 Prediction Panel, an international scientific group sponsored by NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, forecasted below average sunspot activity for the coming year, with 110 to 115 sunspots at its peak. However, updated models from multiple scientists show sunspots peaking as high as 235. So look at that. Look at the difference between, say, 115, what they thought before, to 235. That's quite a difference. That's more than double. Solar activity is expected to steadily increase until fall of 2024, when the likelihood of viewing the northern lights is highest, according to Mark Mish, I don't know, a research scientist at the University of Colorado Boulder and NOAA. So that's an interesting thing to take note of. I'm not going to put it on my timeline just yet. We'll have to see if something incredible happens, if it breaks records for how far south they go, or, something notable. But I think this is a really good thing to have on our radar. A lot of us are looking at next year, primarily because of the eclipse in April and, just everything that's taken place primarily since 2020. So this is one thing to add to next year. Essentially, solar maximum and all these sunspots. Now, if you think about it like this, a solar cycle goes for 11 years. So what I take from this is that this is essentially going to be the strongest or the most sunspots in a couple solar cycles. So, but still, it's interesting to think about. So thank you, Brian, for sending this article, and that's going to be something to look forward to. And I hope that I see it too, because I've never seen it in person. Put in the comments, have you seen the Northern Lights? My father-in-law said that there's they make noise, or you can hear noise from it, which to me that's kind of scary. I don't know. I don't know how loud it gets, but I always thought that it was just a visual phenomenon. But anyway, let me know about your experience if you've seen the Northern Lights. All right, let's move on to the next article. This is from Cabria White, or Cabria, I'm not sure. Subject line, coincidence, ... Nah. And then she says, my goodness, this is exciting to me. Anything that gathers everyone to the same purpose or goal always gets my attention. Especially that picture on the front for Come Follow Me next year. Take a look. What do you think this could mean? So let's take a look. She took a screenshot on her phone that needs to be charged. Unifying Come Follow Me for 2024. And then here's the cover for 2024's Come Follow Me. Of course, it's going to be the Book of Mormon. And so the scene that they chose to depict on the cover is Christ coming to the Americas. It seems like there's a lot of emphasis being placed on that right now. If you've watched my last couple of videos, we've talked about how President Nelson, in October, the very last talk, he showed us the video from the Book of Mormon video series of Christ coming to the people of the Book of Mormon. And then that was October. And then in April, General Conference, his last talk, he asked us to read that account. Almost like he really wants us to think about what it's going to be, what it would be like to have Christ come to you, and come to the church. Probably because that's, on deck, it's coming up pretty soon. Oh, that's cool. Looks like this story came out at 11:11 a.m. Mountain Time. Sorry, I'm a sucker for numbers, especially numbers like 11. But anyway, it's also on the church website. It's available right now if you go to Come Follow Me. And it's just right here because like Cabria said, it's not separated by Sunday school, primary, or anything like that. It's just all together. So, and this actually goes along with the next email. This is from Robert Dransfield. Dear Jared, I found it very interesting that the church is already using the Second Coming picture for this upcoming October General Conference. This is on the current church website. Please see attached screenshot for my iPad. Buckle up your seatbelt, eat your Wheaties, smiley face. Thanks for all you do, Jared. Bob D. So he included this attachment. And we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth pointing out again. just the imagery that they're using. It's okay. So if you were in charge of the church, or if you were like in charge of like preparing things, let's say it was left to you, which of course would be a disaster, but let's say that you were tasked with getting the church ready for the second coming. You might expect that this is something that you might choose to do, increase the imagery of Christ, but especially Christ in the second coming. And then when talking about the Book of Mormon, Christ coming to the Americas. You see what I mean? So if you think about it that way, is that what we're seeing right now? Now, of course, the one that's in charge of the church is Christ, and he's the one that gives inspiration, leads the church, gives revelation, direction, guidance. And so for all we know, maybe this was an executive decision by him to help all of us start to visualize what's actually about to happen. But here and then here, this imagery is starting to just pop up all over the place, and I think that it's interesting. So thank you, Cabria, or just correct me, is it Cabria? I'm not sure. And then thank you, Robert, for sending me that, and very interesting things to think about, indeed. Okay, the next email is going to take us into the main topic of this video. This is from Penny Tidwell, and she says, "Not sure if this one was on your radar. Elder Christofferson posted to his Facebook page. Thought you could add to your spreadsheet. Link at the end." So let's just go, and the rest of it she just copies and pastes. So let's just go directly to the link. Let's read what he said. Okay, earlier this week, and by the way, this was posted on the 21st. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of joining with President Dallin H. Oaks to install C. Shane Reese as the 14th president of BYU. All right, so 14th. And I decided to just take a quick, look-see at previous presidents of BYU. And I can't say that I'm familiar really with any of these names except for a few, which you will be as well. So we had Dallin H. Oaks from August 1971 to August 1980. And then after him, Jeffrey R. Holland, September 1980 to 1989. And then after that, Rex E. Lee, Merrill J. Bateman, Cecil O. Samuelson Jr., Kevin J. Worthen, and now C. Shane Reese. Let me know in the comments if you've been to BYU or if you know any of these other men other than Elder Jeffrey R. Holland and President Dallin H. Oaks. Do you know any of these other ones? Okay, so we're on number 14 now, which is 2 sevens, right? 7 plus 7. Not that I put a whole lot of stock into that, but just interesting to note. All right, continuing, Elder Christofferson says he and his wife, Wendy, have tremendously willing and consecrated. Okay. He and his wife, Wendy, have tremendously willing and consecrated hearts. And with that, the Lord will magnify them in this assignment. We may be moving into a more fractious world than any of us have experienced personally heretofore. The leadership of Brigham Young University, the leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and all of us individually will need to navigate and make decisions in the presence of uncertainty. It will be needed in the midst of this uncertainty to focus on what is certain, to maintain the eternal verities. The truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ are the underpinnings and the lodestar of Brigham Young University. While less appreciated and even opposed in some quarters, these truths and principles take root here and bear beautiful fruit in the lives of students and faculty alike. May we consistently defer to the will of God, seek to serve and strengthen one another, and never forget the source of our strength. All right. And then here's the pictures down here. So the part that we're going to be focusing on, because it seems like this is what everybody's focusing on, is moving in moving into a more fractious world than any of us have experienced personally heretofore. Something, like I said, that all of us would probably guess anyway. This may, him saying this here may be prophetic. But either way, there have been some really interesting things said about future persecution and current persecution. Specifically, we're going to start out with BYU, with a former president of BYU, Jeffrey R. Holland. One of my first videos on this channel was about his address to BYU in August of 2021, because August 2021, that's the month that I started my channel. And this was kind of a big story when it came out, because it upset a lot of people when he gave this address. So it was the beginning of the school year. The name of this talk, or this address, is called "The Second Half of the Second Century of Brigham Young University." And let's see, I was hoping that it would give more information about exactly what, but anyway, let me just read a couple parts from this that made people upset. Okay, so he quotes something that Elder Neil A. Maxwell said. Okay, so from Neil A. Maxwell: "In a way, Church of Jesus Christ scholars at BYU and elsewhere are a little bit like the builders of the temple in Nauvoo, who worked with a trowel in one hand and a musket in the other. Today, scholars build the temple of learning. Today, scholars building the temple of learning must also pause on occasion to defend the kingdom. I personally think this is one of the reasons the Lord established and maintains this university. The dual role of builder and defender is unique and ongoing. I am grateful we have scholars today who can handle, as it were, both trowels and muskets." And that's the end of the quote. So this, along with what I'm about to read, upset the secular people and the people that are opposed to the gospel, that are opposed to the church, opposed to righteous living, so on and so forth. And of course, they focused on the musket imagery, because a musket, if English isn't your first language, it's a gun. Let's look that up. I'm sure you'll recognize it right away. Images. So, okay. So it's like this. It's like a old school, like rifle, essentially. Okay. Okay, so now it's Elder Holland. To this, Elder Oaks then challengingly responded, "I would like to hear a little more musket fire from this temple of learning." He said this in a way that could have applied to a host of topics in various departments, but the one he specifically mentioned was the doctrine of the family and defending marriage as the union of a man and a woman. Little did he know that while many would hear his appeal, especially the school of family life, which moved quickly and visibly to assist, some others fired their muskets all right, but unfortunately, they didn't always aim at those hostile to the church. We thought a couple of stray rounds even went north of the point of the mountain. So let me just give you a little visual on that. By just its context, I'm sure you understand that he's referring to like north toward church headquarters. So Here you have the Salt Lake metro area, which is in the Salt Lake Valley. So it's this circular or oval area right here. And then south, you have Provo and its metro area. And they're divided by essentially these two mountains right here, where everything comes to like this bottleneck, right? And you have the one main highway, I-15, that goes around the point of the mountain. And so when he's referring to a few stray rounds going north over the point of the mountain, he's talking about BYU down here in the south and taking metaphorical shots at church headquarters up here, right? And this isn't really a topic that I really dive into too much. Things like social justice and wokeness and what's it called? CRT, critical race theory. That's more in the lane of Greg on the Quick channel, CWIC. I'm sure you're familiar with him. But anyway, if you've been following him or you've just been watching the situation, you know that there are people at BYU that are essentially hostile toward the church. Like there's professors there that are secular. And they essentially, from what I understand, again, I haven't really looked into it too much myself, but from what I understand, there's some of them that are essentially radicalizing students at BYU. And I've heard stories where you'll have someone that goes to BYU, their parents send them off. Oh, yay, they're going to the church's school. If you ever watched the movie The RM, and I would encourage you to watch this. Let's see. Movie RM, Hailstorm Entertainment. Right here. This is a really funny movie. At this point, it's pretty dated, but oh, look at that, 2003. Came out 2003. I had not gone on my mission yet, but there's a part in here. There's a part in here where when he comes back from his mission, he applied to BYU and he got the response letter in the mail. And the mom's like, oh, look, our son, he's about to be accepted into the Lord's University. Oh, my gosh. These movies I love them. They have a special place in my heart. There's this one. There's The Singles Ward. There's other ones too, but these movies made my heart so glad when they came out. They like to poke fun at church culture and mostly church culture around the turn of the millennium. Like I said, it's dated at this point, but anyway, yeah, people that go to the Lord's University and become radicalized, they actually come away hostile toward the church. So bizarre. So bizarre. So what happened was, I don't know all the ins and outs, but the church is aware. They're not, disconnected. They're not out of touch with what's going on there. They have parents and stuff that write in and complain about it. And so what happened in 2021 is Elder Holland, he spoke to the faculty and staff at this like commencement address. So we thought a couple of stray rounds even went north to the point of the mountain. So, they're basically calling him out. Like, hey, don't think that we don't see what you're doing. We realize your hostility. He goes on, I'm going to read this part too, because like he said, a lot of this revolves around the LGBTQ thing that is really being pushed at BYU by certain groups. Okay, so he says, in that spirit, let me go no farther before declaring unequivocally my love and that of my brethren for those who live with this same-sex challenge and so much complexity that goes with it. Too often, the world has been unkind, in many instances crushingly cruel to these, our brothers and sisters. Like many of you, we have spent hours with them, and we have wept and prayed and wept again in an effort to offer love and hope while keeping the gospel strong and the obedience to commandments evident in every individual life. But, and please take note, because I know that there's some that for some reason they can't see past this issue. I understand. I understand if you have a family member that's dealing with this. I do. I've talked about him before. It's my brother. He's transgender. He is a biological male. I'm not going to be forced to identify him as something that he's not. And I talk to him respectfully. I avoid saying pronouns and stuff like that because I do not have to participate in that whole thing. But we're on good terms. We communicate. He came over here to Kansas a couple of years ago, and it was fine. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to start advocating for and being a champion of that cause, because the gospel doesn't change, and the pattern of the family through eternity does not change. This is how not just life on earth is organized among humanity, among the animals, but it extends into the eternities, worlds without end. That's how it's how reality is structured. So listen carefully. Elder Holland says, but it will assist all of us. It will assist everyone trying to provide help in this matter if things can be kept in some proportion in balance in the process. For example, we have to be careful that love and empathy do not get interpreted as condoning and advocacy, or that orthodoxy and loyalty to principle not be interpreted as unkindness or disloyalty to people. As near as I can tell, Christ never once withheld his love from anyone, but he also never once said to anyone, because I love you, you are exempt from keeping my commandments. We are tasked with trying to strike that same sensitive, demanding balance in our lives. And let me just add right here, that applies to everything. It doesn't matter what the sin is. It doesn't matter what the unrighteous desire is. Everyone has some kind of vice. Everyone has something or multiple things that they want to do that goes against the gospel, that you can make the same argument for, that, this is just how I am. This is how I was created. So I shouldn't have to change it because I was created perfectly. And no, you were not created perfectly. You were created with weaknesses and things that you have to overcome. And there's a wide array of things in this life that we overcome as a human species. Some people it's this issue, some people it's that issue, but there's a very rich variety of things which everybody has to overcome. All right, continuing, he says, musket fire? Yes, we will always need defenders of the faith, but quote unquote friendly fire is a tragedy. And from time to time, the church, its leaders, and some of our colleagues within the university community have taken such fire on this campus. And sometimes it isn't friendly, wounding students and the parents of students, so many who are confused about what so much recent flag waving and parade holding on this issue means. My beloved friends, this kind of confusion and conflict ought not be. not here. There are better ways to move toward crucially important goals in these very difficult matters, ways to show empathy and understanding for everyone while maintaining loyalty to prophetic leadership and devotion to revealed doctrine. And then it goes on. It's a very, very, very good talk. And he said it with a lot of tact, a lot of love and caring, but there gets to be a point where you can't go any further. You can't go back on the principles of the gospel. And there's some people that are unrelenting, that aren't going to stop until, I don't know what they think. I don't know if they even believe in God or what the case may be, but think that it's appropriate, for example, like I pointed out before, to go to church headquarters and to protest the prophet, as though the way to get things done in the church is through protest. As though, church leadership is going to be like, okay, we can't do this anymore. It's time to reveal, sealing between same-sex couples. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And I think that there's some people that don't have very strong testimonies, or any testimony at all, that think that they can pressure the church and force them to bow down to their desires. So, going back to this, Elder Christofferson is talking about the future and how it's going to become more fractious. Okay, there's going to be more division, more controversy, more just people going with all sorts of different ideas. And he's saying it, in this case, he's basically saying it in the context of BYU and the future BYU and this new president of BYU, C. Shane Reese. That essentially, I personally would not envy being C. Shane Reese. I'm sure he's confident in what he's going to do, but probably of all 14 presidents of BYU, he probably has it the hardest as far as these challenges that are coming up in our society and in the church. So, persecution from within the church, let alone persecution from outside the church, persecution also within the church from quote unquote members of the church that are essentially, I'm not saying all, but some are essentially living their own private religions and wanting to change the church and mold the church to fit their personal religion. I'm going to read some more about persecution within the church, but before I do that, I want to read a couple other things. This was another thing from Jeffrey R. Holland, Safety for the Soul, October 2009 General Conference. He says, prophecies regarding the last days often refer to large-scale calamities such as earthquakes or famines or floods. These, in turn, may be linked to widespread economic or political upheavals of one kind or another. But there is one kind of latter-day destruction that has always sounded to me more personal than public, more individual than collective. A warning perhaps more applicable inside the church than outside it. The Savior warned that in the last days, even those of the covenant, the very elect, could be deceived by the enemy of truth. If we think of this as a form of spiritual destruction, it may cast light on another latter-day prophecy. Think of the heart as the figurative center of our faith, the poetic location of our loyalties and our values. Then consider Jesus' declaration that in the last days, quote unquote, men's hearts shall fail them. And boy, oh boy, are men's hearts failing them right now in the church. Their loyalties, their values, their faith, all that stuff, it's failing them, even the very elect. We're going to talk about that more in a minute, but I want to remind you, or perhaps introduce to you for the first time, something that President Nelson said his second year as president of the church when he was visiting Samoan members. So this is from the 19th of May, 2019. President Nelson urges Samoan members to be strong, facing persecution, attacks of the adversary. And I know that this made news when it happened. I think it'd be worth reading it again, because he also talks about persecution, in the days ahead. Now remember, this is in the past. This is in 2019, and so I think that we've already seen a lot of what he's talking about. The reason why I say that, by the way, is not just because I think it, but because I decided to look up on my phrase tracker the words persecute, persecutions, plural, and persecution, singular. I wanted to just see, are they talking more about persecution? And if this is the first time that you're seeing this spreadsheet, it's a tally of the number of General Conference talks that use these words or these phrases. So, for example, the word persecution has been used once this year in General Conference. Once. Last year, it was used in 6 General Conference talks. So I have everything color-coded so it's easier to visualize. So if it's darker, then that's a year where the term or the phrase or the word has been said more than other years. And it's interesting because you can see a dark line right here in the year 2020. So 1 year after he talked to the Samoans. Now, compare that to recent decades. There's actually some other decades that maybe come close or are even worse than right now. So you have an 8, 4, and a 6 right here. You have a 7 in 2011. There's kind of a higher frequency time in the early 2000s. Now, you need to keep in mind, I didn't go through every single talk to check the context in which this word was being used. So, for all I know, they could have been telling a story of the pioneers, the early church, or maybe a story of like missionaries being persecuted in a certain location. But in general, I think it's helpful just to kind of take it all together in that you can still see patterns. And that's what I've seen time and time again. So whatever the case, in the early 2000s, there seems to have been a higher frequency. And maybe that's because they were preparing the saints at that time for what was going to be happening in the years to follow. Think back to 2005, think back to 2003. There was wickedness. There definitely was wickedness. But whenever I think of 2003, I always think of the Iraq War. I always think about how things, from my limited perspective, how things in the United States and then later the rest of the world started to become so divided over the issue of the Iraq War, which started in 2003. And this is when, again, from my own experience, this is when things like went into overdrive as far as like political divisiveness. Now, I remember back to like the 90s, divisiveness, like with like elections, like for example, George Bush, Ross Perot, and Bill Clinton. There was divisiveness back then, but it really seemed to take off after 9/11 and the Iraq War in particular. So, and since that time, things have society has gotten darker and darker and darker. I just recently watched The Amazing Spider-Man. I don't know if you've seen this movie or not. The Amazing Spider-Man. So these came out in 2012 and 2014. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. These were actually pretty good. They were better than I thought they were going to be. But like I watched these movies and it felt like they might as well have been from like the year 1980 or maybe the 1990s. Like there wasn't as much like bad stuff in there as there are in movies today. I was like blown away. I was like, how long ago was this movie put out? It was only 2012 and 2014. It's amazing to see how far we have fallen since that time. These two were actually relatively wholesome movies. But in like nowadays, like whenever you watch any new Marvel movies, for example, they're all like there's like good ones, but every single one of them has just gunk in it, spiritual darkness and gunk and dirtiness and filth. It's just bizarre seeing the contrast. If you haven't, you should watch this and think about what things were like back in 2012 and just how far we have fallen. So, going back to this, I don't know. You go back, there's also kind of a higher intensity period during the 90s. And then before that, maybe a tiny bit in the 80s, not so much. And then probably the decade that takes the cake is the 60s, it would seem to me, if you look at this right here. And we all know what was going on in the 60s. That was definitely a dark time. And then for some reason, in 1955, there was a lot of talk about persecution in that year. And then in the years following World War II, there was a little bit of a spike. So I don't know. So the most recent spike was the year 2020, a year after President Nelson said this. And just think about all the social upheaval that took place in 2020. Okay, so he says, there are difficult days ahead. Please protect your children, help them to know the Lord and love him and keep his commandments and be free from the shackles of addiction and bondage. But there's more. Let's go down. He says, this church, when restored in its fullness, will prepare the world for the coming of the Lord. What? I didn't even recognize that the first time. So the implication here is that it's not restored in its fullness, which we know. Okay, we know the ongoing restoration, but it's just interesting that he dropped that in there. He said, this church, when restored, meaning it's not in its fullness. Of course, everything that was necessary was restored through Joseph Smith, everything that was necessary for salvation and exaltation, but the rest of it, no. So this church, when restored in its fullness, will prepare the world for the coming of the Lord. So a reference to the second coming, end quote. But not before Christ's followers are persecuted, he said. Quote, church members in the Samoan Islands will not be immune from being persecuted, he said, warning them to, quote, be prepared to be persecuted even every day, end quote, and telling them they have a solemn duty to prepare for it. And quote, please protect your families from the deception you will see in the future. That's why we are all busily engaged in this work. We have to fortify our people against attacks from the adversary. end quote. He told them not to become discouraged. He said God will provide them with revelation, strength, and the ability to judge right from wrong. Sister Wendy Nelson said her husband often receives inspiration for the direction of the church during the night and gets up to take notes. Now, this doesn't have to do with persecution, but I added this to my quotes A through Z spreadsheet. If you go down to Revelation, dreams, and night, she's talked about this before. In that same year, she talked about how he receives like this revelation at nighttime, and like she wakes up and then she'll either just stay quiet one time. And it's in this quote that I have up right now. She talked about how she felt from the Spirit that she needed to get out of bed. And, you know, she was working on family history for 2 hours. And then President Nelson came to her and he's like, you can't believe what was happening over the last couple hours. I've been given detailed instruction about a process I am to follow. So I am going to be adding this. I haven't added it yet. Oh, don't forget, Jared. Don't forget to add this. I need to add it. You know what? I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be safe. And I'm going to put it there now. And then I'll do the reference later just so I don't forget. Okay. That'll stand out because I don't have this formatted correctly. Okay. So she says... Sister Wendy Nelson said her husband often receives inspiration for the direction of the church during the night and gets up to take notes. Quote, just this past week, the inspiration was flowing so rapidly during those early morning hours that he went to the office in our home and wrote for 3 hours. Wow, that is crazy. I wish, I wish I was privy to see like all the revelation that he has received. And, he doesn't have to like broadcast it for the world in order for the Lord to give him revelation. We don't know, with any given prophet, we don't know how much revelation has been received. So when we're like so quick to like start complaining about a change in the church, a new program, a change to this, a change to that, taking this away, we should be mindful they really are prophets, and having very real experiences like this at nighttime for hours, taking down detailed notes on the direction that they're being given. Okay, so let's move on. That's it for that. All right, so persecution. I would venture a guess that it's already happening. Just generally speaking, it's just going to continue. There's probably those of us that'll experience it more than others. I can't say where I'm at. We've experienced really too much. Well, no, we haven't experienced any. Everyone here in Kansas has been nice, and whenever we bring up the church, like no one ever attacks it. Our girls haven't been attacked at school. Like we're in a really good, wholesome area and everybody's very respectful. But feel free to put in the comments, have you received persecution? And, well, honestly, I guess I could say that I've received from my brother a little bit. He likes to post really inflammatory things on Facebook, and I know that it's focused on me because sometimes we'll have a conversation and then later I see these things pop up. Aside from that, I don't know. I don't know that I've experienced too much lately. All right, but anyway, let's talk a little bit more about persecution coming from within the church, because this is probably where a lot of it is going to come from. Maybe the most severe of it. So this is from Ezra Taft Benson, April 1969. And we were just talking about the 60s. That was a time when they were talking a lot about persecution in General Conference. So this is what he says. Disharmony of some members. Sometimes we hear someone refer to a division in the church. In reality, the church is not divided. It simply means there are some who, for the time being at least, are members of the church, but not in harmony with it. These people have a temporary membership and influence in the church, but unless they repent, they will be missing when the final membership records are recorded. Have you ever thought about that? You think about the people around you that seem to not like honestly struggle, like they're like trying to do better, but people that seem to more than struggle to keep the commandments, they more give in to the ways of the world. And again, not to judge anybody, but sometimes you see it before it happens. I saw it on my mission with certain missionaries that I worked with, where it's like I could see that the behavior, the mindsets, the love of the world, and lo and behold, after their missions, after a year or two, maybe a few years, they fall away from the church. Right? Temporary membership. Okay, he continues. It is well that our people understand this principle so they will not be misled by those apostates within the church who have not yet repented or been cut off. But there is a cleansing coming. The Lord says that his vengeance shall be poured out upon the inhabitants of the earth, and upon my house shall it begin, and from my house shall it go forth, saith the Lord. First among those among you, saith the Lord, who have professed to know my name and have not known me. That's from D&C, section 112, verses 24 to 26. And I specifically looked this up because I wanted to see, did anybody else give like a definition of what this means? You know, upon my house shall it begin. I'll show you what I found, but this is what Ezra Taft Benson says. And then he continues, I look forward to that cleansing. Its need within the church is becoming increasingly apparent. Well, that's back in 1969. Look at us now. The Lord strengthened the faith of the early apostles by pointing out Judas as a traitor, even before this apostle had completed his iniquitous work. So also in our day, the Lord has told us of the tares within the wheat that will eventually be hewn down when they are fully ripe. But until they are hewn down, they will be among us, or with us, among us. The hymn titled, Thou in the Outward Church Below, contains this thought. Though in the outward church below, both wheat and tares together grow, ere long will Jesus weed the crop and pluck the tares in anger up. We seem alike we seem alike when here we meet. Strangers may think we are all wheat, but to the Lord's all-searching eyes, each heart appears without disguise. The tares are spared for various ends, some for the sake of praying friends, others the Lord against their will employs his counsels to fulfill. But though they grow so tall and strong, his plan will not require them long. In harvest, when he saves his own, the tares shall into hell be thrown. Hymn number 102. Is that currently in our hymn book? It's probably my new favorite hymn. Not because I want people to go to, the celestial kingdom, but just pointing out that this reality that so many people turn a blind eye to, always making excuses for people, always, and we should encourage, we shouldn't discourage. We're not called to be inquisitors and go around and harass people, but At the same time, I think that we should be mindful of the truth. That way you can protect yourself from becoming a prey to manipulative behavior, control, apostate ideas and stuff like that. It's good to be able to judge righteously for yourself, not applying your judgment to them or, ruining anybody's name or anything like that. But just be aware of the truth. So it turns out that it's not in the hymn book. It's not in the hymn book. Though in the outward church bulletin. Let's just do one more thing. Let's search by, maybe they just rearranged it. Control F, outward. No, it's not in the hymn book. I say bring it back. Bring it back. Put it in the new hymn book. Okay, tares among the wheat. Yes, within the church today, there are tares among the wheat and wolves within the flock. As President Clark stated, the ravening wolves are amongst us from our own membership, and they, more than ... we should be careful of them. I guess that's an incomplete quote, but and they, more than, I assume that would be more than those outside the church, people that are not members, we should be careful of them. It requires righteous judgment. The wolves among our flock are more numerous and devious today than when President Clark made this statement. President McKay has said that quote, the church is little, if at all, injured by persecution and calumnies from ignorant, misinformed, or malicious enemies. A greater hindrance to its progress comes from fault finders, shirkers, commandment breakers, and apostate cliques within its own ecclesiastical and quorum groups. You see that? And I was trying to find, I swear there's this quote, and I think it's from Ezra Taft Benson, where he said in his own words something to the effect that the greatest danger to the church is from within rather than from without. If you know the quote that I'm talking about, will you put it in the comments or send me an email? I'm going to add that to my quotes A through Z spreadsheet. And I think the reason why is because, if you're wheat, that means that you have a heart and you're living righteously and you care about people. And so when you care about somebody, but they're going down a bad path, you want to maintain that friendship or that relationship, whatever it is. But the problem is what Jeffrey R. Holland was talking about. Some people misinterpret that as they misinterpret love as meaning that you're supposed to go along for the ride. You're supposed to support that cause because you love and because you're not judgmental, right? Because that's usually the argument that they'll use against you is you're judging. Yeah, you're right. I'm judging righteously. I'm judging who I have in my circle of friends and the people that I spend time with, because even though I will spend time with you, if I spend too much time with you, you're going to be a bad influence on me, and it's going to be detrimental to my eternal welfare. And I would invite you to come be like me. Come learn the ways of the Lord. You're welcome here. We can show you a better way of living. But I wanted to look really quick because he said fault finders, shirkers. I'm thinking shirkers is kind of like people that avoid work. In the army, the word was sham, shamming. And it was a beloved word. among the junior soldiers. It was an art. I didn't do it. I was a good worker, but there were some soldiers that were really, really good at disappearing when suddenly there was a detail that had to be done, or some kind of duty. Just very good at suddenly having a doctor's appointment to go to, or, oh no, they can't possibly do this because they're on profile right now, which means like they have a medical exemption, but sometimes that gets into gray area. But anyway, I wanted to look at, okay, so fault finders, shirkers, so people that, squirm and get away from responsibility and doing what they should do, commandment breakers, and apostate cliques. What is an apostate clique? Well, let's look at the word clique, and I'm sure we all already know what it is, but this would probably be beneficial for the people where English is not their first language. Okay, so in English, clique, a narrow, exclusive circle or group of persons. That's from Merriam-Webster. Oxford Learner's Dictionary says a small group of people who spend their time together and do not allow others to join them. And then there wasn't anything in Webster's 1828 for clique. And then I decided it'd be helpful to go to Wikipedia, and I'm pretty satisfied with the way that they describe it here. Okay, a clique in the social sciences is a group of individuals who interact with one another and share similar interests rather than with others. Interacting with cliques is part of normative social development, regardless of gender, ethnicity, or popularity. Although cliques are most commonly studied during adolescence and middle childhood development, they exist in all age groups. They are often bound together by shared social characteristics such as ethnicity or socioeconomic status. Examples of common or stereotypical adolescent cliques includes athletes, nerds, and quote-unquote outsiders. To which I would add, I would maybe reframe that as counterculture types, hippies, hipsters, whatever. List all the cliques that you can think of from high school in the comments below. When I was in high school, there was like a temporary fad going on where there was like the skaters, like that was like the counterculture of my time, skaters, and later, like being a punk, like that started to, even though punks had been around for a long time, it started to like really become popular like once I was done with high school. Anyway, gothic, the goths that would like dress, paint their faces white with like black lipstick and come to school like that. Okay, typically people in a clique will not have a completely open friend group and can, therefore, ban members if they do something considered unacceptable, such as talking to someone disliked. Some cliques tend to isolate themselves as a group and view themselves as superior to others, which can be demonstrated through bullying and other antisocial behaviors. And you guys, it can exist here on YouTube too. It can be on YouTube. It can be other places. It can be anywhere. I've always found it my policy to avoid these social structures called cliques because they're horrible. It doesn't matter if it's nerds or outsiders or whatever. When you get into this like exclusive little group of people where it's like you become part of a collective that is just not good. It's just not good. It's almost like you become brainwashed. And I feel like I see similarities between the idea of a clique and the more controlling, manipulative type personalities out there, like narcissists and psychopaths. If you think about it, it's essentially a way, it's like a type of defense. Like it's like a social defense. It's like somewhere where you belong. And so it's like a mutual alliance or a defense, and with similar goals and stuff like that. It's just, I don't like it. Never have, never will. But the scary part about it for me is that it kind of, if you allow it to, it overrides your agency, because for the sake of being a member of the clique, whatever it is, you have to conform. You have to give up parts of yourself in order to fit in. And the only organization on this earth that I'm going to do that for is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, not for these man-made little things. There was another part I wanted to read. This involves meeting new people to form relationships and work together to gain better opportunities. So not only protection, but also, better opportunities. Like what? Well, let's continue reading. Some people find that being associated with a clique is a way to find or gain a better chance at success. For example, many join a sorority or fraternity to gain an advantage at getting a job because they may be hired by someone affiliated. Cliques go hand in hand in the way people network and are especially prevalent for those looking for jobs. And I don't like that because that's kind of almost like secret combination-y to me. It's like these little groups, these, beneath the surface and in the shadows and the corners groups that work together to gain advantage in society. And this is just a small example with sororities and fraternities. Let me know if you've been in a fraternity or a sorority. Prove me wrong if you think that it's a good thing. Maybe, I don't know, maybe sometimes it is, but let me know how you feel about those things. So going back to this. Okay, so he's talking about these different behaviors: fault finders, shirkers, commandment breakers, and apostate cliques. Apostate cliques. I'm sure that there's a whole variety of little groups out there in the church that, do bad things. For example, you have like these little cult followings, as is the case with the Daybells. I'm sure you've heard of the Daybells. I think that was essentially a little cult / clique of people. And a couple of them ended up in trouble with the law. You have other ones that go off in strange paths and basically start up their own gospel, saying things, teaching things that are not taught by church leaders. They usually look at scriptures and twist them and contort them to some weird thing. Avoid those groups. Avoid them. They're no good. If it's a group that does things in secret, that meet in secret, or they are just very, very exclusive, those are bad signs. those are bad signs. We need to just get all of our information, like all of our doctrinal information, through authorized sources like apostles, prophets, scriptures, but both of those together, not one or the other, but both of them together. All right, continuing, he says, not only are there apostates within our midst, but there are also apostate doctrines that are sometimes taught in our classes and from our pulpits, and that appear in our publications. And these apostate precepts of men cause our people to stumble. As the Book of Mormon, speaking of our day, states, they have all gone astray, save it. I think it's supposed to be were, save it were a few. Anyway, stray, save it a few, who are the humble followers of Christ. Nevertheless, they are led that in many instances they do err because they are taught by the precepts of men. It goes on. It talks about people that publish their differences with the church, through different forms, books or whatever. Nowadays, you could probably include YouTube, people that go on and complain about the church and all this stuff. Groups like the ordained women, that would be like another clique / cult / strange path that's out there. And they have a website, and it goes against church doctrine. Okay, why did I have this up? Right here, this is why. I have this up because I wanted to find another talk that talked about this idea that it'll begin with sifting judgment would begin first at the house of God. Okay. In fact, let me just pull up the scripture so I say it right. And upon my house shall it begin. Okay. So this is from Neil A. Maxwell, 1982. In the midst of our afflictions, reassurances will come to us from the Lord and from his prophets, as they did to the Lord's people in another age when they feared an approaching army. And the prophet reminded and reassured them, and therefore they hushed their fears. Like a young Eliza Snow in an ox wagon in the midst of tribulation, we can maintain our perspective about things as they really are. And in her words, be thankful that we are so well off. Such reassurances and perspective will surely be needed, brothers and sisters, for the Lord has clearly indicated that his purifying and sifting judgment would begin first at the house of God and then proceed outward toward the world. Just what this sifting will consist of is not now clear. What special pressures, combined with the ongoing and demanding rigors of taking up the cross daily, we know not. We do know that the tempter's triad of tools, identified by Jesus as temptation, persecution, and tribulation, will be relentlessly used. So, let's read one more. This is another one from Neil A. Maxwell before I comment. This is another talk. This is 6 years later in 1988. He says, so let us look at ourselves. For the church, the scriptures suggest both an accelerated sifting and accelerated spiritual and numerical growth, with all this preceding the time when the people of God will be armed with righteousness, not with weapons, and when the Lord's glory will be poured out upon them. The Lord is determined to have a tried, pure, and proven people, and there is nothing that the Lord thy God shall take in his heart to do, but what he will do it. And and he cited this. He cited D&C 112, verse 25, and upon my house shall it begin. So the sense that I get between reading all these different citations, and there's more, most of them are from the Journal of Discourses, but they all more or less seem to agree that the feeling that I get from it, they didn't spell it out, but it seems to be just simply people that don't stay with the church. I'd be willing to guess that we're seeing it right now more than ever. Persecution from outside the church is knocking loose those people that don't have very strong testimonies, or they care more about fitting in with society, and so they get knocked loose. And that's probably oversimplified. There's probably many different reasons why someone would be cleansed or leave the church. Many different reasons. But I feel like there's a lot of social pressure right now. The world keeps getting more wicked, and there's a lot of temptations. And the way that society as a whole is going, it's getting worse. So in other words, everyone uses the 1950s as like the golden standard for morality, a time when, at least in the United States, everyone more or less hung on to good values and morality. And family was valued. So was love, respect, hard work, gospel values in general. A lot of them were held by society at large. So to get along in society, you had to go along to get along. But now that bar is being lowered. And so it's going way down, way past where the church is at, way past where the church is at. And so some people wanting to fit in, and since everybody else is accepting these really low standards, is just going along with it. Sorry, sometimes I'm not the most eloquent at expressing myself, but hopefully that made sense. And I think it's just getting harder. It's just getting worse. We talked about CRT earlier in the video, the critical race theory. I think that's one thing that's drawing some people away from the church, because some people somehow get ultra fixated on that one thing in the narrative that the enemy is trying to push to make the church look bad, to make Brigham Young look bad, and whoever else, but the church as a whole and individual prophets, and using that to convince people that the church is bad based on the story the twisted story that they want to tell, for example. And so people are being deceived. They're feeling ashamed. And where do we see that happen? We see it in Lehi's dream, the great and spacious building, people laughing and mocking. And for some people, it's too much. They don't want to experience persecution. They don't want to be laughed at. They don't want to have to defend the church. They don't want to have to fight. So you just go along to get along. And sadly, that's how some people live their lives. They have no backbone. They don't value truth. And unfortunately, with truth comes sacrifice. That's just how it is. So, is that all that I have? Yeah. That's all that I have. I don't know that Elder Christofferson is making a very specific prophecy or anything like that. But I think he's acknowledging the reality of the world and the reality of what this new president at BYU is stepping into as the world gets worse and worse. And who knows what the next causes will be, the next identities that are going to come out that people are going to claim that they are. Who knows what other things we're in store for before Christ comes. But at least for probably the next few years, C. Shane Reese is going to have to deal with it at BYU as professors and faculty and students try and infiltrate the university and teach these worldly philosophies. And again, I feel bad for him, but I'm sure the Lord will sustain him and he'll find the strength that he needs to accomplish that mission. Oh yeah. And then to finish off, I wanted to really quick talk about the future being bright, because some people, I just get this gross sense when I hear some people talk or leave posts that whenever you're talking about persecution or the Constitution or whatever, there's some people that just seem to just almost revel in it in a weird way. It's almost like they portray that, oh, it's going to be so horrible, but they also seem to like the idea that things are going to get really hard and, oh my gosh, we have so much that we're going to have to go through. And it's just so weird to me. It's so weird. It's like people that enjoy fear and almost look forward to it. Anyway, let's read what the general authorities say about the future instead of like getting all scared over things. This is from Elder Neil L. Anderson, Drawing Closer to the Savior, October 2022 General Conference. Today and the days ahead require more focus and concentrated effort, guarding against diversions and carelessness. But even with the increasing worldly influences around us, we need not fear. The Lord will never desert his covenant people. There is a compensatory power of spiritual gifts and divine direction for the righteous. The next one is Elder Christofferson Golden of the 70. And this talk is about the second coming. It's called Prepare for the Second Coming of Christ, October 2021 General Conference. For those who have eyes to see and ears to hear and hearts to feel, more than ever before, we are required to confront the reality that we are getting even ever closer to the second coming of Jesus Christ. True, great difficulties yet await those on earth at his return, but in this regard, the faithful need not fear. All right, Dallin H. Oaks. President Dallin H. Oaks talking about the United States and the Constitution. Something that people seem to really like to be afraid about. Our belief in divine inspiration gives Latter-day Saints a unique responsibility to uphold and defend the United States Constitution and principles of constitutionalism wherever we live. We should trust in the Lord and be positive about this nation's future. I always get some kind of comment in response to this. I didn't say it. President Oaks did. And there's people that just love to just think about the, how bad, the bad direction that this country is going. And oh my gosh, it's so bad. And it's just bad. Well, it's not all bad. Listen to a member of the first presidency, a prophet, seer, and revelator. One in particular that's very interested in the law of the United States, in law in general. He says that we should be positive about this nation's future, that we should do our part. We need to defend the Constitution, but he doesn't say, well, all's lost, things are just going to get worse, so it's over, folks. You're not going to see any of them say this because it's not the truth. Let's finish with this one by President Nelson. April 2021 General Conference, What We Are Learning and Will Never Forget. Much has happened in the past 2 years. Some of you have lost loved ones. Others have lost jobs, livelihood, or health. Still others have lost a sense of peace or hope for the future. My heart goes out to each one of you who has suffered these or other losses. I pray constantly that the Lord will comfort you. As you continue to let God prevail in your life, I know that he is just as optimistic about your future as he has ever been. Later in the talk, he says, the future is bright for God's covenant-keeping people. The Lord will increasingly call upon his servants who worthily hold the priesthood to bless, comfort, and strengthen mankind, and to help prepare the world and its people for his second coming. It behooves each of us to measure up to the sacred ordination, we have received. We can do this. So, be hopeful. Be optimistic. Don't be pessimistic. Don't look at statements that, oh gosh, things are going to get more divisive in the future and there's going to be more persecution. There's already been persecution. It's just that there's going to be more, and it's going to be doable. Just work on yourself. I think the people that are afraid, there's probably different reasons. Some people probably just don't know any better. Maybe they haven't read the scriptures enough to know that the Lord's covenant people are going to be preserved by and large. Others, I think you might have to ask some of the hard questions and look inside of yourself and ask things like, am I leaning on my own strength rather than I know that the Lord is going to carry us through this? Do you have a testimony of that? Or do you tend to do things your way with your own strength? Because if you do, then yeah, maybe you do have need to fear. Because any given one of us are not very good at this life. You know, some people get lucky, some people put in work and they succeed, but doing this life alone without the aid of the Lord, without his guidance, is much more difficult. And if that's the world that you live in, then I could understand why you're afraid. So you should probably stop doing that and start putting more trust in the Lord. Just little by little. Start little and just see his hand in your life. Keep record of it. Write down notes. Write down spiritual experiences. And the more you do that, the more you realize he really is there and you don't have any need to fear. And then another hard question I think that you need to ask yourself, and me too, is, are we living righteously? Because I think we're going to have a lot more peace, regardless of future persecution or disasters or wars or whatever, if we know that we're living righteously. Because we have the assurance that the Lord is going to protect his people. So ask those questions if that's what you need to do. If you're one that tends to dwell on a bleak future. So, okay. Well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.